Hi. Been a while. Yeah, it's been nearly 10 months since I uploaded a video on this channel, and there are some reasons as to why that is the case, and I may do a video at some point next week explaining what those reasons are, and also what you can expect from this channel moving forward. But that's a different video for a different time. This video, on the other hand, is concerned with my annual tradition of looking at what happens when you combine each of Europe's top 5 leagues into one mega league. So what does that involve, I hear you ask? Well, I will be combining each of the 96 teams who competed in the Big 5 European leagues this season, namely the Premier League, La Liga, the Bundesliga, Serie A and Ligue 1, and ranking them from highest to lowest based on the points per game that they accrued over the 2023-24 season. I have to use a points per game system for this experiment, as both Ligue 1 and the Bundesliga only play 34 games in comparison to the other 3 who each play 38, so it would be unfair on French and German teams to rank them lower simply because they've played 4 fewer games than their counterparts, through no fault of their own. If 2 or more teams find themselves on the exact same points per game, then goal difference will be the deciding factor, and if they still can't be split, then we shall use their goals scored tally across the season as the final tiebreaker. I will also provide you with context of how each team has done compared to their performance last season, although the newly promoted teams, since they weren't a part of last year's experiment, will have new next to their name. And finally, as I always do, I will start from the top and work my way down, as I think it's more interesting to see which teams did the worst over which teams did the best, because the teams that did the best are normally the more obvious ones. I have done this type of video for the past 4 years, so I'll be sure to stick links on the end screen of this video for the one I did last season and the one I did the season before that, if you want to watch them for further context. And of course, if you go on to enjoy this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'm hoping to get back to posting regular content again, and it really does mean the world for those of you who have stayed around, and of course those of you who are new to the channel and want to see what I make going forward. So here are your top 20 teams for the 2023-24 season, and to the surprise of probably absolutely nobody, this year's winners are the invincible Bayer Leverkusen. Xabi Alonso's side blew away the Bundesliga to win their first ever Meisterschale, accruing 90 points, going unbeaten throughout their 34 games, and ending Bayern Munich's run of 11 consecutive top-flight titles in the most emphatic of fashions. Their points per game of 2.65 puts them 0.15 ahead of second-place Real Madrid, who won La Liga with 95 points, in addition to beating Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League final last week for their 15th European crown. Rounding out the top 5 are Italian champions Internazionale, English champions Manchester City, and the Premier League runners-up Arsenal, who managed to accrue more points per game than French champions PSG. However, whilst other European giants Barcelona and Liverpool take their places in the top 10, 2 surprise packages also find themselves among Europe's elite this season. The first of those is Girona, who emerged as surprise title contenders for the first 2/3 of the season in Spain before ultimately falling short. But they did well enough to earn Champions League football for the first time in their history next season and, regarding this list, jumped from 52nd last season to 10th this time around. But the biggest risers of them all, and indeed the biggest risers in the history of this experiment compared to their performance last season, are VfB Stuttgart. From only surviving by virtue of winning the relegation playoff in 2022-23, they had a stunning campaign this season to not only finish second in the Bundesliga, ahead of Bayern Munich no less, but also catapult up some 71 places in comparison to their performance the previous season. To put that into context, they finished 5 places below Real Valladolid in 2022-23, who were relegated from La Liga, but now find themselves ahead of the likes of AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, Juventus, and Champions League finalists Borussia Dortmund. What a turnaround. Elsewhere in the top 20, we have Bayern Munich, whose hegemony over German football was ended to such an extent that they couldn't even crack the top 10 in this list. Europa League winners Atalanta, the only team to beat Bayer Leverkusen all season, Athletic Club, who ended their 40-year trophy drought by winning the Copa del Rey, and another surprise package in Bologna, who, under the guidance of the now departed Thiago Motta, finished 5th in Serie A, qualifying for the Champions League, with Italy receiving an extra Champions League slot, and 20th in this list by virtue of goal difference. Moving on to positions 21 to 40, we have a team who stunned the footballing world and shook up Europe's elite, namely Chelsea. Okay, joking aside, the Blues managed to rebound from a disastrous 2022-23 campaign, which saw them finish 61st to achieve a somewhat respectable 26th place this time around, although it must be said that without Cole Palmer, they probably would have finished a heck of a lot lower. The actual team doing the shaking up of Europe's elite thing is undoubtedly Stade Brestois 29, who obtained the highest league finish in their history by coming third in Ligue 1, something which earns them a spot in 21st, up 41 places from last year, and they only missed out on the top 20 to Bologna by 3 goal difference. Other teams to feature in this bracket include Aston Villa, whose remarkable turnaround under Unai Emery has been rewarded with a first Champions League campaign to look forward to since 1982-83, Roma, who recovered from a poor start to come in 6th in Serie A following a good run of form under Daniele De Rossi, RC Lens, who couldn't replicate last season's second place finish in Ligue 1 and fell 28 places in this ranking from last year, and Manchester United, whose dreadful league season was only saved by an FA Cup win over their local rivals Manchester City. However, the biggest surprise here, to me at least, is Napoli, who won last year's iteration narrowly ahead of Man City, but following the departures of manager Luciano Spalletti and defender Kim Min-jae, they slumped all the way down to 37th. They'll be hoping they can recover next season following Antonio Conte's appointment as manager. At this point, we have seen 10 teams from Italy, 8 from England, Spain and France apiece, and just 6 from Germany, whose only representatives in the 21 to 40 bracket, namely Eintracht Frankfurt, only made it in by virtue of goal difference. They finished 6th in the Bundesliga and were closer to the relegation playoff place than they were to 5th. In the bracket of teams who finished between 41st and 60th, we find our first 3 newly promoted teams in the mix, namely Genoa, Alaves and Heidenheim. Genoa are the only newly promoted side to end up in the top half of this ranking, finishing narrowly ahead of a resurgent Crystal Palace and fallen giants Valencia. Meanwhile, Heidenheim are the lowest ranked team to have qualified for European competition next season, having benefited from Germany receiving a 5th Champions League spot to finish 8th and thus qualify for the Europa Conference League in their maiden Bundesliga campaign. Elsewhere, we have a few teams who fell off pretty drastically from their previous season, most notably Freiburg, who sank 32 places to 55th in long-serving manager Christian Streich's final season at the club, and Stade Rennais, who are now 43rd, having cracked the top 20 the previous year. By contrast, we have 3 extremely high rises in the forms of West Ham, who only narrowly missed out on a spot in the top 40, having come in 74th last season, Bournemouth, who improved massively under new boss Andoni Iraola, and Everton. Now, regarding the Toffees, I must add that I have disregarded any points deductions for this year and decided to solely focus on the actual points tally each team got. As such, for the purposes of this video, I'm using Everton's tally of 48 points rather than the 40 they ended up with, owing to an 8-point deduction, and likewise, Nottingham Forest's 4-point deduction is disregarded, meaning that they will have 36 points for this experiment rather than 32. Therefore, Everton came in 50th rather than 67th, as they would have done had the points deductions been applied. Now let's go on to the bracket of 61 to 80, where the most interesting team to focus on first, in my opinion, is Union Berlin. The capital club endured the biggest fall from grace in comparison to their previous season out of anyone this time around, as after a stunning 22-23 season which saw them qualify for the Champions League, they spent all of this campaign in a relegation scrap, ultimately just about managing to finish above the relegation playoff spot on goal difference alone. The team that ended up in said relegation playoff, namely Bochum, did manage to survive, meaning that for the first time since 2020-21, no relegated teams feature among the top 80. Other notable teams in this section are 2022-23 Europa League winners Sevilla, who are in the midst of a financial crisis which could see them end up in serious trouble with the authorities come next season, newly promoted outfit Las Palmas, Brentford, who were brought back down to earth in some respects following a less than ideal season which saw them drop 35 places from last year, and Nottingham Forest, who were one of only 2 teams along with Arsenal to finish in the same position as they did in 22-23. As we reach the 81 to 90 bracket, I can tell you that the Premier League has had 17 teams feature, likewise La Liga, the Bundesliga and Serie A 16 apiece, and Ligue 1 14, meaning that they are the worst performing league thus far. But they are also the first league to strike out completely, as all of those remaining 4 teams, namely Le Havre, Lorient, Metz and Clermont Foot 63, who were the second biggest fallers behind Union Berlin, with a drop off of 54 spots, a position between 81st and 90th, meaning Ligue 1 is the only league not to have any of its teams feature in the bottom 6, which I will reveal in a moment. However, by virtue of Cagliari and Le Havre finishing in 81st and 82nd, both of whom staved off relegation this season, it means that each of the 14 teams who are relegated finish in the bottom 14 spots, the first time in this experiment's history that all of the relegated teams have finished below everyone else. Among those, we have 2 of the 5 exact ties on points per game and goal difference in this video, namely between Sassuolo and Köln and Lorient and Metz. Had Metz managed to win the relegation playoff against Saint-Etienne, they would have been the lowest ranked team to survive, as although they finished above Lorient in the actual Ligue 1 table by virtue of a superior head-to-head record, they finished below them here as they scored 8 fewer goals. Both of them are relegated anyway, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. Now, normally, I would reveal who finished in positions 91 to 95 before unveiling the teams who finished from 96th to 98th, but as a result of Ligue 1 shrinking from 20 to 18 teams as of this season, we don't have a 97th or 98th place anymore, so it's ruined my system a little bit. I'm not bitter or anything. I promise. Anyway, instead of that, I'll just show you the teams who finished between 91st and 96th, where we have 2 teams each from England and Spain, and 1 apiece from Germany and Italy. So, who came in last in this year's list, joining the esteemed company of Toulouse, Schalke, Greuther Fürth and Angers? Well, the wooden spoon goes, probably quite predictably, to Sheffield United, albeit with one hell of a fight. Or whatever the opposite of one hell of a fight is in this instance. The Blades endured a miserable return to the top flight, conceding 104 goals, the most in Premier League history, and accruing just 16 points to end up with a measly points per game of 0.42, the lowest in the history of this experiment. However, Salernitana almost finished level with them, as a draw on the final day against AC Milan lifted them up to 17 points in their own horror show of a campaign, which saw them win just twice all season. Although they would have finished above Sheffield United on goal difference regardless, had they both been tied on points per game. Completing the list are Burnley, whose return to the Premier League lasted just a single season, but who did well enough for manager Vincent Kompany to get the Bayern Munich job, Granada, who were also relegated in their first season back in La Liga, Almeria, who broke a Spanish top flight record for failing to win any of their first 28 matches, and yet still managed to finish above 4 teams in this list, and SV Darmstadt 98, who also amassed just 17 points, like Salernitana, although by virtue of playing 4 fewer games than the Italians, they avoid second to last place. So there you have it, your winners are Bayer Leverkusen, your losers are Sheffield United, the biggest risers are VfB Stuttgart, and the biggest fallers are Union Berlin. Who do you think will hold all those titles next season? Let me know down in the comments below. And that just about wraps up today's video looking at what happens when you combine each of Europe's top 5 leagues into one mega league for the 2023-24 season. If you enjoyed this video, of course, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'm looking forward to getting back into hopefully making regular content again, and as I say, I'll make a video in the next week or so explaining why I've been gone and what you can expect from the channel moving forward. But in the meantime, if you want to watch last year's experiment, there's a link on screen right here, and for the season before, there's a link on screen right here. But thank you very much for watching this particular video, and it feels good to say this again. Until next time, I'll see you then.